My Celebrate Recovery testimony. My name is Charles Snipper, and I was born on September 3rd, 1993. I don't remember much from my earliest years, but my story really begins when I was 8 years old. I became seriously ill. I had no energy, was constantly thirsty, nauseous, dizzy, and dehydrated. The only thing that seemed to help me was drinking melted popsicles. Day after day, I continued getting worse until eventually the hospital in Florida transferred me to Vincennes, Indiana. My blood sugar had reached nearly 2,000. Doctors were able to save my life, and I spent almost 3 months in the hospital. My mom and Aunt Dawn stayed by my side through it all. Looking back now, I realize how serious the situation was. But at the time, I was just a kid. I remember the nurses bringing me gifts from the gift shop, and one even brought me a shoebox full of baseball and basketball cards. I spent most of my days laying in bed playing PlayStation games. When I finally came home, life changed forever. Learning to live with type 1 diabetes was difficult. I hated checking my blood sugar. I hated taking insulin shots. My mom patiently taught me how to care for myself. For a long time, she was the only person I trusted to help me. School wasn't easy either. I was often sick, anxious, and bullied. Home felt safe because my family was there. Some of my happiest memories are simply being at home with my mom and my brothers. We didn't have much, but we had each other. As I grew older, life became increasingly unstable. We moved often. I learned not to get too attached to people because it seemed like I was always starting over. Every new school felt like being the new kid again. I began carrying a lot of anger. My home life was chaotic. There was conflict, instability, and situations that no child should have to navigate. Looking back, I was trying to protect my family while still being a child myself. I didn't know how to process what I was feeling. Instead of dealing with the pain, I fought. I fought with my brothers, I fought with adults, I fought with anyone who challenged me. The truth is, I was hurting long before I understood why. Then my life changed forever. My mother was killed in a drunk driver accident. The grief was overwhelming. I was angry at the driver, angry at the world, angry at life. I carried bitterness in my heart for years. Losing my mom left a hole inside me that I didn't know how to fill. After her death, I moved in with my dad. I barely knew him, and suddenly I was trying to fit into a completely different family. Even though people cared about me, I felt disconnected and alone. I stopped caring about school. I stopped caring about my future. I was surviving, but I wasn't living. As I got older, I started looking for ways to escape. I turned to partying, drinking, drugs, unhealthy relationships, and anything that could numb the pain. Every time I thought I had found something that would make me feel better, it only left me feeling emptier. I bounced from relationship to relationship, hoping someone else could heal wounds that only God could heal. No matter where I went, the pain followed me. For a while, I worked the carnival. I met people, traveled, partied, and tried to create a life for myself. Some relationships brought comfort for a season, but eventually they ended, and each loss seemed to deepen the wounds I was already carrying. I threw myself into music. I worked jobs, I chased dreams, but underneath it all, I was still running for myself. The more pain I carried, the more my mental health suffered. I struggled with depression, rage, hopelessness, and suicidal thoughts. I spent time in hospitals and crisis units. I felt completely lost. And eventually, I reached one of my darkest moments of my life. After another painful breakup and another season of emotional chaos, I walked to the railroad tracks carrying insulin. I took shot after shot. I didn't care what happened to me. I remember yelling out for Satan to take my soul because I felt like he had already been working so hard to destroy my life. Not long after that, I went into a diabetic coma. I remember seeing a shadow standing in front of a bright light. To this day, I don't fully understand what I experienced, but it changed me. I woke up alive. My brother found me. An ambulance was called. That event eventually led me to stay at Anna State Hospital. At the time, it felt like another failure, but looking back, I could see God was still keeping me alive. I spent months there, attended classes, worked as a janitor, and slowly began learning coping skills. I wasn't healed overnight. I was still angry, I was still struggling, but for the first time in a long time, there was a small spark of hope. After leaving the hospital, life continued to be difficult. At one point, I ended up in Chicago with nowhere to go. I came close to ending up in a nursing home, simply because no one knew what to do with me. Eventually, I put friends with Alexis had come to get me, and I spent time trying to reconnect with God. If you knew me during that period, you probably would have found me walking alone somewhere, talking to God out loud as if he were right beside me, because in many ways he was. One day I returned to the same area where I had previously overdosed. It was a place where friends and I used to swim and spend time together. I put on a pair of headphones and started walking along the railroad tracks. The next thing I remember is waking up in unimaginable pain. According to the police report, I had run out in front of the train. I don't remember much about what happened. I only remember waking up in the hospital in Evansville. I couldn't walk. I didn't know if I would ever walk again. The recovery was long and painful. There were days when I didn't know how I would make it through, but somehow I did. God wasn't finished with me yet. After I recovered enough to leave the hospital, I continued trying to rebuild my life. Unfortunately, I turned to alcohol to deal with physical and emotional pain, and that eventually led to a DUI. At the time, it felt like another failure. Today, I can see it as another turning point, because that is what eventually led me to Friendship Connection. And Friendship Connection changed my life. For most of my life, I didn't believe people truly wanted to help me. I believed I had to survive on my own. But there I found people who cared, people who invested in me, people who showed me grace when I didn't deserve it. I started volunteering and I started serving others. Eventually, they helped me find a place to live. More importantly, they helped me realize that accepting help is not a weakness. It's a part of healing. Today, I spend my time trying to help others the best I can because I know what it's like to feel hopeless. I know what it's like to think nobody cares. I know what it's like to believe you're beyond saving. And I know that's a lie. Because God never stopped pursuing me. Not when I was angry, not when I was addicted, not when I was suicidal, not when I was lying in a hospital bed, not when I was making terrible decisions, not when I was running from Him. God was there for every moment. I still have struggles, I still have challenges. Recovery is not about becoming perfect. Recovery is about learning to trust God one day at a time. One of my favorite sayings has always been, idle hands are the devil's workshop. While preparing this testimony, I decided to dig deeper into Scripture and discovered Proverbs 16. A few verses stood out to me. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. And finally, scoundrels create trouble. Their words are a destructive blaze. To me, those verses describe much of my life before recovery. I spent years following my own path, years believing I knew what was best, years making choices that led me toward destruction. But God kept redirecting my steps. Today I believe staying busy, staying disciplined, serving others, staying connected to God are some of the greatest protections against falling back into old patterns. I also believe in the power of prayer. I believe God hears us. I believe God answers us. And I believe God can redeem even the most broken stories. If there's one thing I want you to remember from my testimony, it's this. No matter how far you've fallen, God is not finished with you. If He can take a kid who is angry, broken, addicted, suicidal, completely lost, and give him purpose, then He can do the same for anyone. This is my story, this is my recovery, and this is my proof that God's grace is greater than our worst mistakes. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to set my story.